So I don't put all my eggs, spiritual eggs, in that yoga basket anymore, in that physicality basket. I see it as something that I'm kind of tied to because now I'm making my living from it. But B, even if I didn't, even if like I, made whatever, like $1 billion on Dogecoin or Bitcoin or something like that, that and I didn't have to work or something like that, I would still be doing my practices as intensely, if not more. It's been more times I don't have to work,
This is the Jai Suguru method. We train to master our own mind. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today I spoke with a peer of mine who's been very inspirational in a strong, silent way by always doing his own thing. David Regelin is a yoga scientist. His class Multi-Intenso is an interdisciplinary approach to training body and mind. I've always been challenged by practices like lifting my arms up for 11 minutes at a time and feeling a very big mental heat in my mind. David's sequencing is very unique. His knowledge of inversions are very advanced, and all of it leads me to a place of deep reflection, and it makes me wonder what else is under this deeply ordered and organized body of mine. His teachings has evolved into a more refined adaptation of how asana, our posture and practice, can instigate profound mind-body connection. Over time, David's reflective nature and incessant personal investigation into the personal transformative powers that a yoga practice can give has led him to a more comprehensive approach to how physical form relates to psychological and emotional states. David and I talk about cultivating and evolving a practice through time. We talk about the value of learning from different teachers and integrating what works while discarding what does not work. You can share this episode with as many people as would benefit from a deep, fulfilling, engaging conversation with one of today's young masters. David.
What's up, man?
So how you been, man? What's going on?
I'm good. Yeah. I've been in New York the whole time.
Yeah.
Whole pandemic time, pretty much. Taking little excursions here and there, but otherwise I've stayed pretty local. How about you? You look like you're in a cabin somewhere.
I'm in a log cabin. I'm an upstate kid. I've been trying to come back for years, but then I've been addicted to the level of income we make in New York, and I never thought I could make a living up here. So I'm mapping the territory. I've connected with Menla. Omega might be opening. They're like 10 minutes away. And a few places in Saugerties and Woodstock. So I'm trying to return to the life I had as a kid and be in nature. And then I came down to see clients 2 weeks ago. So I want to have an umbilical relationship with New York, but be in the woods for a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of my goal too.
Yeah. Hey, where did you grow up? I saw the Metallica shirt on your Instagram. It reminded me of... I used to listen to Metallica a lot to warm up for cross-country races and get pumped in state. Where are you from?
I'm from New York City.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I got into heavy metal when I was like in my early teens. My dad had a job working for Sony Records, and he would bring home like his department had like a bunch of tapes at that time, cassette tapes that would be like dropped off there for people to review or listen to or write editorials about. And so whatever they was like left in some bin at the end of the day, he'd bring them home. So he brought me home like Ozzy Osbourne and like Metallica and Sabbath and stuff like that. So I got like all this like heavy metal after listening to exclusively like, like Duran Duran and that kind of stuff, being like an 80s kid. Just got into heavy metal. So when I was in junior high school, I was wearing like Megadeth back patches and Metallica t-shirts and Exodus patches, etc. All over, yeah. So I'm a New York City kid.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm an upstate kid that moved to the city. I'm really excited to talk to you, mainly a lot about yoga, a little bit about life,
Sure.
And especially about strength. You're one of the guys who has incorporated that the whole time through. And my career started as an athletic trainer and massage therapist. And Eddie Stern liberated me from the yoga lineages. I think around when I turned 40, he just cut me loose because I didn't want to study in India with Sharat. And he said, go back to what you had mastered as a kid and start I'm limited by this form, but you are free to combine it. So I started really building my brand after 40. And up till then, I was teaching Jivamukti and Ashtanga. But I always admired the way you did your own thing and you had the strength tied into that. So before we get to that, have you had any rough patches with this thing, man? I had a really brutal February where I tried to make sense of the world and got really bummed out. How have you been mentally and using yoga to get through this?
Quarantine wise, COVID wise, you mean?
Quarantine wise, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, when it all sort of went down and everybody was like hunkering down, like literally like not going outside except when you absolutely had to. And like, I would make runs to Whole Food and get like the gloves on and the mask and and like, and then like take off my clothes as soon as I got in the house and like throw them in the wash and like spray the area where I walked in, and there's all these neurotic things like door handles. And, like we were under the impression that it's like glitter, this thing could be like someone could have sneezed onto the street and you walked by, got it on your shoe, and then you walked your shoe into your house, and if you picked something up off the floor, that thing had it, and now it's your, and then, so I was like, freaking out, and we were living in an apartment, which seemed big enough. It was my partner and my kid, 3 of us in an apartment, seemed big enough during normal times, but all of a sudden it felt way smaller.
Yeah.
And so we were, like everybody else, kind of like, what do we do to escape New York? But our school's going to open, my kids in school, and like we didn't want to pull them out of there. And then, so yeah, I went through a really, that feeling super claustrophobic, and and also just spending so much time alone with yourself that you do a lot of like reflecting and sort of second guessing the choices you've made in life and the direction you've headed in and so forth. So it's just like, yeah, I mean, anytime I'm left by myself, I kind of like question everything, gets tossed up in the air. And so I certainly did. I don't know if I had like, I wouldn't call it like a depression, but I definitely felt this like ongoing malaise and sort of sense of doom, and that lasted for a while, and now it seems to be lifting more so.
And did it affect your own training, or what sides of yoga? For me, I leaned on Advaita Vedanta, contemplating some of those teachings, and returning to Ashtanga, has helped me big time, even though I have a massive body. When I was mastering the second series, I had weighed 160, 161, and now I'm weighing in 190, 195 with huge thighs. Can't do the binds yet again. But just going back to the system, the regularity, the sequencing, the structure, the surrender to it, and then walking around and thinking about non-attachment and really putting it to use now when I can't make sense of the data or substantiate anything beyond my intuition, and to relax into uncertainty in the outer world. It's like I need those two things to really guide me right now.
Yeah, I had been going to a gym, which I hadn't done. So like maybe the year and a half up until quarantine started, I had joined a gym. I'd sworn I was like, I hate gyms. Like I went to gyms like back in college age, and then like kind of just like the energy there and the music and just the machines, most of which I had no part of anyway. It was just like really off-putting to me. And also just like having to commute there. And, I did that for yoga classes, but eventually my yoga practice became very much like wherever I was, I did my practice. And then, once COVID started, like I'd already had this sort of routine going, which we can go into later if you want to, like how I strength train and stuff. But, I was using a lot of different apparatuses, and I was using a lot of doing a lot of ring work. I'd even started doing back squats and things on the rack. And so then I was at home, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should just get back into my more sort of traditional style yoga practice. But again, like space wise, and not just in terms of the physical space, but in just energetic space, like sealing off the kind of focus that anyway I need to get from the beginning to the end of an Ashtanga practice without like pulling my hair out, it's much easier for me to, with a strength training routine, because you have your sets and your reps and you do those, and you have your time that you're resting in between, could be X amount of minutes. So you could be distracted and deal with this and deal with that, and deal with your kid, and then go back to doing your thing without it really breaking it up, I mean, if you're used to that kind of format.
the metabolic effect of it too gives it an efficiency. Like if you nail that stuff in a half hour or 40 minutes, it trumps an hour and a half Ashtanga practice in terms of just keeping you fit and conditioned.
100%, 1000%. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
leaned on that. I've gone back to it. I finally, I don't know. It's weird. I hit a crisis with energy for like 5 years. My mitochondrial density was nuked because of a drug I took. I had a really bad infection. So my whole life I've had limitless energy. I remember doing primary and intermediate and being at the Shala 3 hours at a time with Eddie sometimes and never phasing me, and then doing a Jivamukti class at night. And then after I took this drug, like, you know, when you're doing sets and you get to like the end and part of you is like, I can do more, and my gains are connected to doing a little more or going a little heavier. I had no fuel or gas for that. And that's been turned back on. So I'm connecting to my body with a devotion and like an enthusiasm. Like it's the first time in my 40s that I've trained twice a day again. And I'm doing like
Okay.
the weight training in the morning, conditioning in the morning. And then I'll do Ashtanga at like 5 or 6, and I've also been running. So 2 a day, one short one, one long one. And it feels like, I don't know, like I'm really admire Wim Hof and how he has turned on the endogenous DMT. I've come close to those states without psychedelics. And I want to really, really take the Hatha yoga to its potential to see what's possible as a scientist with it. And so my path is my body, and it's nice to be able to see what it's capable of at 46.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And to bring in the 2 times a day, it feels like a good bookend to things.
And how much time overall every day are you spending
A half
exercising?
hour in the morning, and then like 90 minutes at night with yoga.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't have
Awesome.
a kid. Not yet.
Right. Yeah. Frees up some time for you there for sure.
Frees up some time.
My kid's out of town right now, and I have like all this free time. You know, like I teach a lot of privates online and then back in person a little bit, and another like, you know, daily tasks I have to take care of. But still, like when I have just like a couple hours between privates, it's a couple hours to like do whatever I want. It's kind of crazy.
Are they all online? Have you started teaching in person again yet?
With a couple clients, yeah. There was one guy that I was seeing on fair weather days outside in his courtyard, and now there's other people who are vaccinated, including myself, who are willing to see me inside. So I've started seeing clients inside here and there, but I still am teaching the majority online, which I'm happy to do actually. At first it was awkward and strange, but now I've gotten used to it and almost pretty good at it. And then scheduling wise, of course, it's way easier to, you can just line things up.
Yeah. You and I know you're one of the guys who we have been all over the planet. We've been grounded, and assists are a big part of it. I was really shocked that Zoom would work so well for creating a good experience if you learn how to cue it properly. I was shocked.
That's the key.
It's incredible. Like I thought this would be a disaster. I'd have to do something else for a living, and it has worked out pretty surprisingly well. And I don't miss traveling to 5 homes a day.
Right. Exactly. And always being worried that you're going to be late, or, some monkey wrench getting thrown in your plans in transit. And the stress that goes along with that, for sure. I mean, I transitioned out of heavy assisting into light assisting, into the most minimal amount of assisting in person, and cueing with my words as much as possible for various reasons. And so that came in handy, especially when I realized how handy that became when I started teaching online. And there's certainly moments where nothing can replace the assist, but I think there's a lot of cueing that can be done, and ultimately people will absorb it and internalize it and be able to sort of use it at the ready, if they can grasp it through cues before you resort to assisting.
Yeah, I taught yesterday, and I assisted 3 people, and I cleaned my hands in between. It was my first in-person class since September. I did a retreat at Menla in September, and then yesterday, and then seeing one-on-ones. I'm comfortable with it, but I wonder how long it's going to take to go back to where it was in terms of touch and teaching with touch, because it's so powerful.
Right.
You know,
yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Yeah.
who knows? So let's talk about yoga. What got you into it? I want to talk about your journey and how at this stage of life, you and I probably view it through a different lens, and it's evolving and culturally it's changing. What made you jump into it?
So when I was a teenager, I went through this, your pubescent years. It's like the second big bang after being born, and it was really, tumultuous. And I craved some kind of steadiness. And so I would run. I was never like on any teams. Like I went to an art high school and I was in the art department, like visual arts. And there was a basketball team. They weren't ranked, and then if you wanted to join track, you had to go up to the Bronx every day. And I was like into punk rock and I had a band and stuff like that. And so I would run, and then I was really lanky and skinny, and just kind of like insecure about that. And so I bought myself a bench press. My room was tiny, and so there was my bed, and next to it was the bench press. Like you had to like walk around the bench press to get onto my bed, and then step over the bench press to do anything in my room, and even to move it to the side to get the door open to my room. So I bought this. I think it was called like a Monster or something like that, like to sit on the side of the bench press. And so I bought plates, and as I got stronger, I bought more plates, and I would work out like for like hours in my room. I come home from school and eat dinner and whatever, do my homework or not do my homework.
Did you have Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding? Did you ever get that?
No, I didn't. I would buy muscle and fitness magazines.
Okay.
And just get routines. Yeah, because there was no internet. So I'm getting routines out of that. I'm kind of piecing it together. And I would put together like, these like, I would be like, okay, I'm gonna do this routine, these are all the things I want to work on. And I would do it, and I would follow the instructions. It would take like 4 hours. But like I'm a teenager, so I had the energy like to lift weights for 4 hours. And, so I went from being like really lanky, like I'm 6'3", and I was probably around that, or somewhere near that at that time. And I was like, I don't know, I never really weighed myself when I was skinnier, but I was probably like 160, 170, something like that. And then I went up to like 200, maybe even like maybe even above 200. And I got like big like this, and it just kind of happened like overnight almost, and, but, that wasn't my intention to really get really big. It wasn't an aesthetic thing. I did want to feel strong, and just have more sort of like presence in terms of strength. But it was this time for myself, this time to like reflect and like be with myself and like and kind of wear out run down my anxiety, just get that energy out. And it worked for me on that level. And that was like around senior year in high school. So then I went to college, and it wasn't the school I went to was like a real kind of like liberal, super liberal arts school, small school. Every kid there was sort of like last kid to be picked for dodgeball, sort of like an odd person out school. And it was definitely not cool to be a big buff dude, and there was like a drug culture and just like a rock and roll punk rock kind of thing going on there. So I, was like hanging out with different people, and nobody was exercising. So I would go for runs every now and again and party like everybody was. And there was a Dharma center, and where a friend of mine kept trying to get me to go and meditate with him. And so eventually I would after lunch go with him and sit and meditate for like an hour, and then go for a little run afterwards. And so that became my practice. And then after college, I was trying to make a living. I was bartending, and it just felt really like lost. And I was going through kind of depressive states, and I would I had this job at this place called Serafina. Now it's like a chain of places you can find all over, but before there was two. One was on the Upper East Side, and then one was downtown on Lafayette Street, and it was a nightclub. And so I got hired there to work the nightclub nights. And for me, it was like a lot of money, but there's a lot of stress, and like people, like just you seeing people going from sober to completely drunk and like volatile and threatening. People are reaching over the bar to try to grab you and strangle you because they don't want to pay their bill and whatever. Bouncer stepping in, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I would walk by Jivamukti, which is then on Lafayette down near West 4th Street, and or East 4th, whatever Lafayette is. And and they had flyers that stuck in the little, like back in the day, flyers, like literal pieces of paper sitting outside, and the wind would blow down Lafayette, and those flyers would go flying down the street all the time. I always saw those flyers flying down the street. One day, one of them literally flew into my face, and I just took it off of my face, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to this fucking studio, because my back was hurting, but also I was just like lost, and I kind of wanted something. I wanted some transcendence, like I wanted to rise above this state. So I went to I've told the story a billion times, but it's sort of funny anyway. But I went to a basics class. I can't remember who taught it. And I wore I wore a swimsuit that had like the net inside. I didn't wear any underwear. I just wore that. I didn't know we were going to do down dog or anything. Suffice to say, the people behind me were mortified. There was a girl behind me. I was just kind of like, I realized halfway through, I was like, I should be in the back row. But I left that class and I was like, damn, this is really intense. This is really hard. And I had that like tingly kind of bliss state afterwards. I was like, okay, I'm on to something here. So I took one basic class, and after that, just jumped into the open level classes. At that time, you could take class with David and Sharon, like just on the schedule. It wasn't like a extra fee or anything. You drop into their class. I started taking Uma Saraswati. I sort of like followed her class. I thought she was just so so full of energy and so out there, and just in terms of concepts, and just like, and then our sequencing was awesome. And I, even though I had some background in martial arts, I kind of skipped over that. I dabbled in martial arts here and there, but I was never like, I'm a martial artist. But I was like, that was like that was what I was before yoga, that's what I was finding in terms of movement. And I appreciated her choreography. Her sequencing felt right. There were other teachers I went to just because they did like arm balances, and I was like, okay, that teacher teaches crow pose and flying crow. I'll go to that class. Like I want to work on those things. And I picked up David and Sharon's book. It's that book with the gray cover, the first one they came out with, I guess.
Oh, the Martin Brading, the photography book, or their actual?
It was like it was their actual method, but I think the front was them in Navasana, like holding hands with their legs, like,
oh yeah,
feet joining.
That's what they use for the teacher training. Yeah.
So I bought that book, and I was just kind of like reading into it. I was like, okay, like there's some depth to this. And so I started basically religiously going to Jivamukti, and that was where I went. And every now and again, this is, I don't know what year this is. This is early to maybe like 1999 or 8 or something like that. So there's only a handful of studios. So I went over to and I tried it, and I was like, this is boring. And I went over to, I took an Anusara class in Vira Yoga or something like that. I was like, this is boring, and I went back, kept going back to Jivamukti. That's where I got my sweat. That's where I got my practice. That's where I got that vibration afterwards. And then eventually I was like, I've got the time. I work at night. I can do whatever during the day, and I've got money coming in. I'm bartending, making cash. And so I decided I would take a training to like deepen my practice, So that's when I found, I tried to do the Jivamukti, and I think either it just started or something like that. And so I would have had to wait like another 6 months, or they weren't that often at that time, as far as I remember. And so I ended up taking a Laughing Lotus training, having only taken one class there. I went there and I was like, I'll take that training. I was like, because it's nearby. And I went and took a class, and that was before they moved into where I don't think they are anymore actually, but their space on 19th Street, I think, and 6th Avenue. So this was on like somewhere around Christopher Street in the Westville, like literally like a studio apartment. I took one class there. I was like, this is fine. And then I ended up taking their training there, and I kind of got like, like one does when they take a teacher training, like wrapped up in that culture. And they hired me right out the box. I guess they were like, oh, he's not afraid to get up in front of people and tell a few jokes. I felt kind of natural.
Was your body open this early with that little practice?
Not really. I mean, no, looking back, no. But no. It is, like in the first couple of years of practice, you just make these big, huge gains in terms, like you couldn't touch your toes, then you touch your toes, and your hands are on the floor. You know what I mean? Like, so no, it wasn't open. And like, when I look back at like, I had some old photos of me doing like a down dog. It's like funny looking, my back, like everything I did is kind of like awkward looking, but like I had some mobility because I put in 2 solid years of like pretty consistent practice. But, I didn't know what I didn't know anyway, but it was good enough in the sense that like, I could teach these kind of open level classes, I guess. I still didn't really know what I was doing, like most people,
Mm-hmm.
But I had that like, which they encouraged. I had that kind of energy to like create like a
also being a male
experience.
a
And
male
being a male,
at
yeah,
that
there was a
time, there many guys like us weren't into it. So if you had a straight male energy, you were definitely, they
100%,
wanted to get you on the schedule.
100%, and that had everything to do with it. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you were in Jiva early on, and since that's such a funny thing with the flyer hitting you in the face, if one
Yeah,
wants to laugh about karma or
sure.
something that looking back on their life path, it's hilarious. Did you get involved with veganism? Because I know they were more hardcore about it then. I did it for 7 years
Hmm.
and came off of it eventually when I had that illness because of the doctor's recommendations. And did you
Yeah,
try it at all?
yeah. Well, I had become a vegetarian at age 15, or was it 14? Around then, I had two older sisters. My second oldest sister, the one just a couple of years older than I am, she became a vegetarian really young because her best friend was a vegetarian. She would always like sleep at her best friend's house and eat their vegetarian meals, and was like, I'm also going to be a vegetarian. And so then my mom had to make more. We always ate vegetables at home and stuff like that, but we were a meat carnivore family. So my mom then started making like tofu and like typical like 80s 90s vegetarian fare and stuff like that, and so I kind of just gravitated more towards that. And then I got into like the music I was into in high school and stuff like that, like hardcore music and stuff like that. There was a lot of like vegans that were into that scene, and my girlfriend at the time came from like a Rastafarian background. She was a vegetarian, so I became vegetarian around 15. I stuck with that until and then when I went to college, I was a vegan for a few years. Just gave up all dairy and stuff like that on top of already not eating meat, and stuck with that until around like 28 or something like that. And then started including meat again, and actually felt way better and way more energized. When I was going to Djibouti, though, I was a vegetarian. That said, a friend of mine, another silly story, a friend of mine gave me a t-shirt from this place in Ohio where we went to school, a place near where we went to school. That was this guy that made ribs, and the t-shirt had a pig holding like a spatula or like a fork, a grilling fork, something like that, and it said "Keep on ribbon" on the back. And I was a vegetarian, but I wore the shirt because it was like green and like rips in it. I just liked it. It's just like comfortable. I could sweat and I didn't give a shit about it. And then I would go to class and wear this "Keep on ribbon" shirt, and I would get a lot of sideways looks from people there, even though I was like, yeah, I'm down with not eating meat, But yeah, I remember, that they were big into veganism. I was into it, but not as into it as they were. And
Yeah, that it's a great starting point in terms of getting the juice of the practice and some actual inner experience. You start to get very subtle there because of the way they combine Nada yoga, the pranayama, the vinyasa. It's really tight. So where else did you go on to study? You're saying that you're just getting your feet wet, and like the reason I adapted well to it is because of my background as an athletic trainer and massage therapist. Like I chose a teacher that could teach me sequencing because I felt like assists would come. I felt like the oration would come, the leadership would come at the right time. But where else did you go to feel structured, and who did you connect with? So for me, like the lineages are part of my culture. So I'm very submissive and almost like a perfect cult member. Like I get really into a form. Like I said, I wasn't liberated to do my own thing until 40. So who else did you study with, or where'd you go after getting the cert got you on the schedule, got your feet wet?
right.
When
For
did you
sure.
start really learning about and evolving more of a technique?
So Laughing Lotus had this very sort of flamboyant, theatrical kind of style. It was you're kind of throwing a party, and it's this kind of cathartic, emotional release party, basically. And so but not a lot, not like heavy on the technique. And they were kind of like, when I did at that time, I was like, I did start going, like I mentioned, I went to Anusara classes, and I was like, fuck this. But then once I got my training, I was like, I do want more. And so then I started going every now and again, going to Anusara. I was like, this is genius. They really break things down. They're very precise. I mean, in my opinion, now they're kind of precisely wrong about a lot of things, but they were nonetheless precise. but Dana Flynn, the director of Laughing Lotus, I assume she still is, if it still exists. She was like, you know what you might want to do? I was like, to be honest, I love you guys. It's great, but I'm a little bit burnt out on yoga. What would you recommend? And, modern dance or what? And she was like, there's a guy who teaches Kung Fu, and Sifu Shiyuan Ming, and it's down on Broadway and whatever street. And so I went down, I checked it out. I watched a Shaolin Kung Fu class. And I was like, this is the shit. And so I joined up right away. Right when I joined up, I caught a flu or something like that. And so I was like, after like 1 week of being there, I was like out. I really think that the Kung Fu was so intense that like my immune system like couldn't catch up to the amount of energy I was putting out there. But I was like, I'm going to do this. So I went religiously. I started going to Shaolin Kung Fu, became my alternate practice. And Shaolin Kung Fu, at least the way Sifu Shiyuan Ming taught it, it's like super heavy on the conditioning. It's basically just the most like rigorous cardio class you could ever possibly do. Like an hour of going super high intensity kicks in different directions and cartwheels and big jumps and explosive movements. And I had with yoga, I had no explosive training. And just like the spherical aspect of the sequencing, you're turning this way and this way. It's not just so front to back like yoga is, and you're traveling across the room. And so I started taking kind of the spirit of Kung Fu into my sequencing, how like one thing turns into another and how like, the feet change position, etc. Eventually I went looking around for other jobs and I found Kula Yoga Project, which at that time was also just a small little room down there on Warren Street. And I think I took Allison Novi's class. It was kind of Skylar, the director, is like sort of homegirl, like best friend and one of their like higher teachers. And they were hiring teachers at the time. And she kind of was like, you seem like you might be interested in teaching. Do you teach? And I was like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I just got my certification. She was like, I'll come take your class. She took my class at Laughing Lotus. And she was like, okay, so we would like you to audition here, just so you know, we have a different kind of thing going here. And we're a little bit more technique oriented and less like guru oriented, I'm like, I think she said something like, we're more like a Sherpa. Like we lead the sheep in a certain direction, but we don't like tell them how to be or something. I don't know. And so I got hired there. Ultimately, Skylar Grant, director of the studio, hired me on this contingency that she could coach me. She's like, you're young, you're new. We think you've got great ideas. I like some of the stuff you did. Some of it was total nonsense, or, you're relying too much on music and sort of evangelism, And so I was like, okay, look, I realize I'm young at this. Sure, you can hire me on this contingency basis. So she would take my class, and this was a real gift. She would take my class, and afterwards, like sit with me. We'd go downstairs. There was another room they borrowed from some acupuncturists there, and sit with me and be like, so why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? And maybe you could do this differently, and coach me. And her style is very methodical. She had an Ashtanga background, an Iyengar background. I think her teacher was Alison West. If anyone knows who Alison West is, also from the Iyengar, I believe studied in the Iyengar lineage, but that kind of broke into her own sort of avenue of alignment or method. And so Skylar became a big influence. I still kept going to Anusara classes. I would take Elena Brower. I just kind of thought it was interesting. I liked how she kind of created this experience for people. And then in terms of like the actual method, I went to Xenia LaRosa, I think was her name. And so, and again, like I wasn't totally into exactly what she was teaching, but how she was teaching, and the precision and the ability to kind of like carry the narrative through to the end, and to hold people's attention. I was intrigued by that. So, and then I picked up Ashtanga later, or dabbled with Ashtanga a little bit. I was a little too headstrong to just like go to a shala and have somebody tell me how to practice. So I kind of like had the little picture of Matthew Sweeney, the little printout thing, and was like, okay, what do I do in between? And my partner, Leah, was like, well, she practiced. That was her first practice. So she kind of showed it to me, but I totally like bastardized it, And then at a certain point I met Nevine Michaan, creator of the Katona Yoga method. Her daughter, Danielle, was the curating or handling or managing the boutique at Kula and she liked my classes, and she would bring Nevine to my classes, and Nevine just took them as an anonymous student, didn't, say, I am a yoga teacher, just so you know. But she just took my classes, a number of them. And then there was one time when my back was out or something. I was like leaning against the wall, trying to like work my shoulder blade into the molding on the wall or something. And then after class, she came up to me and she was like, I can help you with that thing. And I was like, okay. And her daughter was like, yeah, go help him. And so she took me into the room, to the studio again, laid me on the floor, and put her hands not on the right side of my back where I was feeling this restriction or whatever was going on there, my lower trap or something. And she put her hands on the left side of my back and pushed the left side over to the left, and it immediately like relieved the right side where I was pulling the shoulder back, whatever I was doing at the time. And she said to me, your left is invading your right. And I didn't know what she meant, but I knew what she meant. Like I knew some part of me was invading some other part of me, And so I decided, she was like, come to my studio, we'll take care of you. My daughter will drive you, because the studio's up in Katona or Bedford Hills area. So it wasn't just like get on the subway, you had to go to Grand Central and da-da-da. So she drove me out there. I went to class. I'm expecting to do, oh, by the way, I glossed over some other things. I said practice Kundalini yoga with Hari Kar. When she was at Golden Bridge, I got really into that. I also just tripped out on that. I like walk out of my pupils dilated,
Yeah,
like
I remember you once made me hold my arms up for 11 minutes. That must have been the influence. And I was like, holy shit, this guy's
1,000%. Yeah, well, if you don't do Kundalini yoga, it's all freaking nuts. And as soon as you do it, or if if you survive it, you don't walk out and you come back again. Yeah, that's a real mind over matter practice. And that's what Shaolin Kung Fu was too. Their whole thing was more chi, train harder. It was like David Goggins. It was like Chinese David Goggins leading you. It was like, no fucking excuses, shut the fuck up and do it. And you'll find that you have way more potential than your mind thinks you have, like you have to overcome yourself. And so like the Shaolin Kung Fu, like that gave me that mindset stuck with me for a while, where I was just like, I don't want to hear complaining from anybody, including myself, when I teach. So I had that class that was called Multi-Intenso. So I was combining what I was doing, Kundalini, the energy of Kung Fu, if not embodying some of the sequencing structure of that. Plus, I had learned how to do a press handstand. And at that time, there weren't that many people doing press handstands. If someone did it, you're like, who the fuck are you? Where'd you come from? And there wasn't that much information online. It's only get Instagram where you can be like, here's step one. I'm going to protract and elevate your shoulder. Like it was like a few gymnastic drills websites where you can find some obscure little kind of printout things that you could follow. But nonetheless, like I had a friend, Philip Askew, was like a handstand dude, and he could press in the handstand. He showed me some tricks. And so anyway, I was so proud of myself because I'm 6'3", I'm a big dude. I didn't think it was like a thing that we were supposed to be able to do. Us big dudes are supposed to be able to do. I figured out how to do it. And so that was like my thing. And I was like drilling people in the same way I drilled myself. So it was multi-intenso because it combined all these different things, including breath work from Kundalini, including holding your arms up for 11 minutes.
Do you keep that name, or did you dissolve it?
It's still mine. I still use it for like workshops. I believe I still have the copyright on it.
Okay.
And I use it now and again. It's funny because, like some people like scoff at the name, like in multi-intent, like, well, that's so ridiculous. Like if I called it like, multiple intensive, it's like I'm combining multiple intensive, multiple things into one intensive experience,
Yeah.
But that said, it was also the reason why Skylar was like, she told me that you got to rename your class. It can't be Kula Flow because it's too different from what the other teachers are teaching. And we're trying to standardize our things so that people don't freak out when they come into your class and they know it's something different. So in a way that was great because it kind of like got me my first sort of unique branded style, I released the name, I decided to name it that. And that name came from, because I traveled to Mexico a lot. There was this peanuts that were spicy and sour at the same time or something like that. And it said multi-intenso on them because of the dynamic flavor combination. So I figured that was appropriate for my class. So I still I still teach multi-intenso, and it's just like whenever I'm going to really kind of draw from, although I'm always drawing from different things, when I'm ever really going to kind of splice it all together, I use that multi-intenso brand. So then, Nevine was a big pivot for me in terms of learning how to adjust. Like I really never knew, I was never confident in adjusting, or even like, not even not even just putting my hands on people, but like knowing what I want. Why am I adjusting somebody? Just to pull them deeper into a pose, or what's the point? So I kind of got more like what my agenda was and what my objective was in regard to adjusting. And then, they had been like really streamlining their method for years already before anybody even heard of Katona Yoga, before they came to the city. So they had that thing pretty down packed, and it was unique because there was only a handful of us New York kids. We're not really kids, but we're in our 20s, and everyone up there practicing is later on in life anyway. And so we were like the new breed coming up there, but there was just a few of us coming back. And so you could use that material. It was very unique and original. Now there's a lot more Katona training going on, a lot more people influenced by that. So I'm for other reasons also, but I'm less interested in that being like, a main feature of how I teach. Although it's changed my teaching forever.
So I'm influenced by yoga, shamanism, strength training, and community. Those four things kind of guide how I start with a group or an individual. What is framing your current outlook? If it is multi-intenso, if it is something else, like how are you starting with someone? What's the way you're looking at the body? Chaturanga is a pretty damn advanced thing, and it requires quite a bit of strength and stability. And so we can't get past strength. How do you look at someone that finds you and wants to train with you and helping them in stages?
Working with me individually, like privately?
Yeah, or teaching teachers how to teach, because that's a big part of what you did before the pandemic. The structure, right. The structure.
Yeah, well, so with my own practice, I've got, you can see my rings hanging.
Yeah, I just ordered those. I didn't put them up yet. I got them. They came in though.
I love rings. I love pulling. I love hanging. I love being right side up and upside down on those things. And I love, like, there's this whole flip side of everything you're doing on the floor that you're not doing and you can't even approximate doing. There's no pulling that you can do on the floor the way you can when you're hanging. Mm-hmm. You can isometrically retract and depress your shoulders, etc. You can wrap yourself up with a bind and yoke up that leg and reachy, whatever. But you are not doing the same kind of pulling. So that was like, I'd never really had a pulling practice. It's basically, it's the hanging yoga. Rings is like hanging
So
yoga.
This is new for you. How long have you been doing this?
This is about 3 years new.
Okay.
At this point, since I first, when I would go for runs, I always had like I'm not a great runner, but I run a fair weather runner, let's say that. And I discovered there were pull-up bars in Central Park. So I started making part of my running routine that I would stop by and do some hanging, some leg lifts and some pull-ups on the bar, and felt good. And I started making it more and more of a thing where I would go like every time I ran. And I realized, how great it felt, but also poor my pulling strength was.
Can I ask your age?
Yeah.
Are we the same age?
Yeah, I'm 40, pretty much. I'm turning 45 this summer.
Okay, great. So here's where I definitely want to get into this, but do you have less, and I know the kid, Pablo, right? Mm-hmm. That requires a certain amount of prana and energy and awareness, and you're channeling and focusing there. But from a physical standpoint, have you slowed down? Our hormones are different in our 40s than they are in your late 20s. I remember when I got hooked into yoga, I could go 5 hours in a full day and I was totally okay to do it again the next day. I'd have to be super careful if I tried to pull that off now. But have you slowed down at all in terms of like what I was saying, the mitochondrial density, your strength, your recovery for sure takes a little more of a narrow path?
Yeah, I've gotten smarter about how I train in terms of like you do yoga, let's say you do Ashtanga yoga, you do the same practice or whatever series you're working on. Maybe you're doing first and second, you mix it up a little bit. You do second, and Fridays you do first or whatever it is. But you're generally starting with your Surya A, Surya B, your standing series, you do the same thing every day. You go at it. Some days you're pressing into handstands, some days you're doing the most precious hop forward and back, etc., or stepping back, but you're going against that same thing, kind of like a runner who's like, I am a runner, goes running every day, and they change the tempo, they change the distance, but they're still running every day. I changed into, a bro split basically, where I've got a pull day, a push day, a leg day, a running day, and then my recovery day. If it's not a full-on rest day, like no exercise, I am just not going to think about physicality. I'm just going to take a walk with my kid or do whatever. or like recovery type exercises where I do like lightweight work with light kettlebells and things like that, like Turkish get-ups and that kind of thing, where it's kind of like integrative strength, and like kind of weighted stretches and stuff like that. In terms of your original question, I'm stronger now than I've ever been, period. Do I have that same, well, I'm not working on it to the same degree, but that same kind of like explosive energy that I had when I was doing Kung Fu? No, because I'm not training that specifically. Could I go train Kung Fu 5 days a week? I guess I could, but I would probably put other things down, I give whatever I do, I give myself, supposing I do it intensely, with the exception of handstands, which I'll do almost every day. And some days more intensely than others, but always it's the start. It's like my warm up. Whatever I do, I give myself 3 to 4 days to recover from it. This theory is not based on any kind of science. It is based on my idea that like for every decade you've been alive, if you do something intensely and it requires intense recovery, you give yourself a day of rest for every decade you've been alive. So if I'm in my 40s, I give myself 4 days rest after my pulling routine. So my pulling routine, I'm working towards the 1 arm chin up, 1 arm pull up. So that it fatigues you incredibly. And so even if I could probably do it more often, but your muscles get stronger before your ligaments do, So I'm like, also my injury rate is way lower than it's ever been. I mean, I just don't get injured right now, knock on wood. Not that I couldn't, through whatever, but I have nothing. Like, I'm really happy to say, whereas when I did yoga and I did it every single day, I would try to fix the problem with the problem, like, okay, this got tight from overstretching, so let me just stretch it some more,
Mm-hmm.
I also switched from removing a lot of the flexibility things. This is trending now, but it's a good trend. Removing a lot of the passive flexibility and replacing it with mobility work, which is just like you mentioned earlier, it's way more efficient. So my idea now that I'm working with is like, if my mobility training is working, if it's effective, I don't have to do it every day. I don't have to do wheels every single day to see improvement in my wheels if I'm doing the wheels right, if I'm working on them correctly, and if I'm like doing sort of have a bunch of auxiliary exercises that like make me engage my glutes and my hamstrings and my rear delts, et cetera, that I need to hold myself up in a wheel. Things that require skill that aren't just like a range of motion thing, like a handstand, I work on those because I happen to have an interest in it. Not that I think handstands are so terribly important, but I happen to still really love and enjoy the practice of them. They're very meditative for me. So that's the way I kind of like zone in the beginning of whatever I'm going to do. So go to pull day, working on things like 1 arm pull-ups, et cetera, and all the things that lead up to that, lever, straight arm strength things, back lever, front lever, et cetera. And these are, ongoing endeavors where you see very small improvements, and then you have long plateaus and see small improvements again. But nonetheless, I feel like overall, in terms of integrity, it really pays off big. I've got a push day working on towards, handstand push-ups, planche push-ups, and every kind of upper body pushing thing you can think of. Leg day, it's mostly body weight leg stuff, a combination of doing piston squats, shrimp squats, dragon squats, and sissy squats, and all the body weight squats that are trending now, et cetera. I think they're all great trends. I also follow that guy, knee over toes guy.
I don't know him. Yeah.
Oh, you gotta find him. He's the next big fucking thing. He's amazing. He's fixing the world's knees. He's got this bulletproofing program where like the guy is an incredible athlete himself, can jump extremely high after having multiple knee surgeries, and he's totally rehabbed himself, and he's got this huge, like, really high success rate in this program. My partner, she signed up for it, and we've been doing it together, and it's improved my running, like my forefoot running. My stride is way better. I'm way bouncier. Like I feel nothing in my joints whatsoever. My run is much more muscular now, less joint oriented. So when someone works with me, I definitely do, if I've never met them before, okay, I roll out a yoga mat and I put them through a battery of what I would consider sort of foundational yoga postures. And I see where they are posturally in that way. And then I use weighted mobility if they're ready for it. And I diversify their training. If they have a gym where they can hang from anything, even if it's using like TRX or something like that, I start working with them on pulling things. We do squats with kettlebells, body weight squats if they're ready for it. I mean, a lot of people can handle like a weighted squat before they can handle like body weight squats, which require this range of motion, otherwise you're not really doing that much.
So, so it's an integral form of yoga, and your lab is influencing how you pick and choose and progress that individual based maybe on their goals or what they're capable of in that moment and the next.
Both, yeah. Like I want to know what they want.
Yeah.
And then I'm combining that with what I believe they need, A, to get what they want, or B, just to get what they didn't know they need.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the yoga, like I mentioned, that bench press that was my yoga practice, like I didn't have a teacher in front of me telling me that I'm offering this up to, some higher good or something like that. But I definitely was this I'm an introverted person by nature. And this was just like my way in,
Mm-hmm.
and same thing with running. And it was the same thing when I went to that Dharma Center. That was another way in, but I never saw, when I went to the Shaolin Kung Fu, like I saw all forms of, for me being a physical guy, all forms of physicalities being it wasn't this separate, I do this physical thing, then I got this spiritual thing, so I went to yoga, it had this different narrative, but it was the same part of me that was engaging with that narrative, that was engaging with the other narratives that I had going on when I did other practices, or when I do other practices. I didn't mention I did Thai boxing at a certain point. When I was teaching at Coolio, I was like, I want to fight, because Shaolin Kung Fu, you just punch the air. I was like, I want to punch somebody else, and have somebody punch me and deal with that. And so I went there to train long enough to get the blue grade, so I could spar. Ended up getting a rib broken, regrettably, but I've also learned a lot about myself sparring, and how one pointed and focused and this meditative, like streamlined you had to be in terms of consciousness to stay in that zone. I mean, it's amazing where your mind will go in spite of someone's throwing punches at your head or trying to kick your head off. And you'll think about like a Simpsons episode, like in the flurry of punches being thrown at, I'm like, where did my mind just go? And you come right back,
Yeah.
So all this stuff, when I do my routines at home, it's like, no, I don't sing a mantra, I don't but like there is this space, this internal space that I go into, and I come out of it. And if I do always finish with a breathing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And I put on a timer for 5 minutes. I put on something, like, if my kid's home, like racket or whatever, put on headphones and listen to like the sounds of the ocean or something like that, just some white noise, and just do like 5 to 10 minutes of breathing. And if it's quiet enough still, I'll also do some meditation. Honestly, yeah, there's a different feeling in my body to a certain degree, but in terms of like that centeredness that you feel, potential to feel centeredness after a yoga practice, I get that same hit. And for me, it's always like, ultimately, like it's happenstance that you walk into a yoga class and you happen to be on a rectangle, because rectangles, you can fit more of them in a room, you know what I mean? So that you're not on a circle, and it's happenstance that the Kung Fu said you're going to go in a straight line across the room instead of zigzagging across the room, because it makes more sense, because this room is built like this, and we're going to talk about this because it comes from this context in India. We're going to talk about that because it comes from this context in China. And you talk to somebody else who's got Wim Hof, who's referencing something else, or whatever it is, and so for me, like, I've always pulled from different philosophical reference points, but the yoga practice, this embodiment practice, it's taken on so many different forms. And I find the same thing when I'm running. My running is my pranayama practice full on. That's when I pay the most attention to my breathing. In fact, I don't teach anybody pranayama until I know they can run and breathe through their nose.
Yeah, the breath is what ties it all back together. And I feel like I never really learned to meditate until Vinyasa Yoga. I was a big runner. I did 3 marathons before I even went to Jivamukti. So to keep it around the breath and to realize I'm helping to bring people to the point where they can sit with themselves and learn from that stillness. Like, that's the guidance. That's what I'm there for. And then from there, if the philosophies and the spiritual teachings unfold, they unfold from an experiential place of stillness and reflection. So it's back to the breath always, and integrating as many of those modalities that I learned as a kid as possible. And The strength though, you're training once a day, twice a day, and also teaching from that place of strength, right? When do you introduce the strength? Like, is your class similar to the ones I took in New York, the Multi-Intenso?
Probably not. It depends on who I'm teaching, like what audience I'm in front of. Like so for example, I taught a training with Krista Cahill, and she's from an Ashtanga background. And this was the title of the training was like something along the lines of, I can't remember exactly, like Ashtanga meets Vinyasa, or journey from Ashtanga to Vinyasa, like how to kind of like take the roots of Ashtanga and adapt them to the freedom to choose of Vinyasa. And so when half the group had a strong Ashtanga background, half the group was just coming out of nowhere or Vinyasa land. And so I definitely, like, everything I taught, which wasn't exactly Ashtanga, I could relate back to Ashtanga, So if I taught them push-ups, for example, I'm like, okay, you're doing chaturanga. What goes into a chaturanga? Do you have control over your scapula? I teach like scapular movements, without weight, without your body weight, and then on your hands. And then we work into full push-ups. Chaturanga is 1/4 of a push-up. It's half of the way down, and there's the rest of the way down, and there's half of the way up, and then there's all the way up. So if you divide the push-up into 4 parts, and then you can, if someone can't do a push-up, but they're doing a lot of chaturangas, I feel like they're setting themselves up for shoulder problems, right? So if you want to jump back to chaturanga, but you don't own this bottom half, you never go into it. You're missing out. Like, why? Why are you not doing that? It's because the way the practice that was handed to you and the teacher who was handed to them, etc., said this is the only part that we give a shit about, that we do. And there might be some reason which I don't subscribe to. Maybe I would have given it more. I might have like your nadis connecting in a particular way, or because of the sequence and its magical formula. I've gone from trying to start with that being true and reverse engineering it to now being like, I'm just going to toss that out. Here's what the body can do, and everything you do in the body is going to affect your nadis if they exist one way or another. And I've met people who've been working with the formula, and I don't see any light coming off of them. I mean, not because of their practice anyway, because of other things about them, but not because of the practice. So I'm not worried. That's not my concern or a limiting factor for me. When I taught this Katona at the same time, or starting a little bit sort of into that, I taught the Katona training. And so I'm working with people who've got this very, less is more. The less you say, practice is always coming, and just lock the legs and down dog and call it a day. To the Katona people, which is like, I need theory, I need technique, and they won't straighten their legs, and they only bend their knees. And so I kind of being like, you guys should try bending your knees. You guys should try straightening your legs. And ultimately, you want to do everything your body can do. And that's the way you're going to, that's the path to resilience. That's the path to the anti-fragile body. Ultimately, what I want is my body to be powerful, vital, and a non-issue, not a problem, not getting in my way. No back problems shutting me down, making me cancel work, cancel friends, cancel life, the way I did, where I was kind of sacrificing my body for this practice that I was doing, thinking I had to get further and further along to, part of me is me putting the pressure on myself. The other part of it is the idea that you get better in this practice when you get better as a person, and the two happen in parallel. I used to buy into that, which I don't anymore.
Yeah. One day you and I will fade. We're holding on to it super fucking well. And we are scientists, so we're interested in the edges, and we want to see what's possible. One day we will lose our balance, and we are battling senescence and lazy cells that won't replicate. We're doing a good job of it now.
Yeah.
And you described that adolescent boy looking for confidence. I certainly relate to that, because my body budding and learning to run and lift and being a bodybuilder, all of that was one stage. Then there was the yoga stage. I had a very humbling experience watching the body decay. I was bitten by an insect in the jungle in Peru when I was on retreat. And I suffered for a year with this disease, this flesh-eating disease that left a giant hole in my left leg. It started in my face. It was in my nostrils. I was doing pranayama one day and I was bleeding, and they did a biopsy, found it in my face and my throat.
That's crazy.
it's totally crazy. So I'm like in my late 30s going through this, getting doctors to figure it out. And it was definitely a battle with death that made me look in the mirror and eat the teachings of Jivamukti and go, you are going around the world telling people we are not the body, we are not the mind. This is the time to really find out and to really embrace what is before you. You had a choice between 2 experimental drugs. And I took the more potent one on the liver because I didn't want to do this battle twice. But this stuff with the body, it's obvious where the body is going. And you and I are going to get, like, if we had a blowout injury tomorrow, we'd rehab it the best of our ability and we'd come back because it's our way. It's a way into something deeper. But as far as spirituality, and it's just such a beautiful fucking mystery that if you run, the adaptive response is more red blood cells. If you lift, your osteoblasts hold more onto the bone cells. Your tendons hypertrophy, they get thicker. It's so magnificent. Agonist, antagonist. There's so much mystery here. Where does it unfold? You don't have to get into Sanskrit, but as far as a subtle layer for you, as far as where you're bringing people with the knowledge that your body will fade, will age, even if that day is 80 or 90, we're up against inevitability. So I feel like I'm bringing them to something Sharon taught me. She said, there's one asana really, and it's being comfortable with yourself. There's a culture of buying things we don't need. There's a culture of conquests over others to figure out who we are. There's all this illusion to cut through to find something real. Have you had, I'm sure you have, but the humbling life experience that taps you into the place that you're using your body to get to? The illness for me was so transformative. It was such a chance to utilize the teachings and become them.
Yeah, I haven't so far had any serious illness or something that like full on stopped me, where I was just kind of left with myself. And I'm not entirely sure. I think of as physical practices, yoga included, as being this. You're tuning your nervous system basically, and you're using it with more or less skill to learn how to kind of like be be well adjusted. And according to like what you believe is necessary. Do you need to whip yourself up? Do you need to calm yourself down? Do you need to be by yourself? Do you need to be with other people? Like, what does it take? And what avenues do you need to travel down to find those things to set you straight down the middle path? I don't know that I expect anymore for the physical practice to deliver this transcendence. I think life experience and just relationship to life, your relationships with the people around you, the relationship with your family, and now especially with my kid, like when you have a kid, it's this huge trip. First of all, number one, right away, you forgive your parents for so many things. Right away, you're like, I get why you lost your shit and screamed at me with, or like foam was coming at your mouth after the 20th time that I did whatever, and you asked me not to, or I wouldn't put on my shoes and socks when it was time to leave the house, but we had to get to this thing, and it's like there's no time to like, you just got to do it. I forgave them for so much, and then I kind of forgive myself for so much, for so many of like the, I see in my kid and the things that he struggles with, and in terms of like, his sense of self and his sense of feeling secure in the world and belonging, etc. And it brings you back to your own childhood, and you kind of come to terms with that to a certain degree. And you'll see people who don't come to terms with that. They're just kind of trying to make keep their kid from having all the bad experiences they have. And so they either like are super overprotective or super aggressive about like steering them away from those things and not letting them just kind of go through it the way they did. So that was a big sort of like reckoning for me. Just having a kid, even before he was born, just knowing he was coming, I changed. And then it was a big change once I had him. My mother passed away this year. That was another kind of threshold. It's like, okay, the person who gave birth to me is now gone. Like this root disappeared. You know, it's like getting a tooth pulled out. Have you ever had a tooth pulled? You're like, there's a piece of you just left your body, you know? That's intense, you know.
Was it
like
related to COVID or no?
No, it was not. Well, you know, perhaps indirectly, she was in an assisted living home and we couldn't visit her. She was isolated for a year. No one could go there. So I feel like she died of loneliness, but she never caught COVID. She had other things like Parkinson's, et cetera, which were really sad to see the body failing her after being a really, she struggled in her life with, manic depressive things, but people who knew her mostly knew her outside of the home where she was more on the upside of the manic depression. She was just a powerhouse. Like, everyone was like, she was a force to be reckoned with. I was like, well, you didn't see her like when she couldn't get off the couch for 3 days in a row or whatever, but that's all good. But yeah, so that was a big thing. I mean, I really feel like it helps to have a practice. You don't need a practice. You meet people who are awakened or realized to a high degree, and they might have a practice, but it's nothing like what we're talking about. It might be like gardening or just take walks or, whatever it is, caring for other people or something like that. So I don't put all my spiritual eggs in that yoga basket anymore, in that physicality basket. I see it as something that I'm kind of tied to because now I'm making my living from it. But B, even if I didn't, even if like I, made whatever, like $1 billion on Dogecoin or Bitcoin or something like that, that I, and I didn't have to work or something like that, I would still be doing my practices as intensely, if not more. It's been more times I don't have to work, So yeah, the body is gonna fail. I don't want to believe it, and I don't have like physical reasons to, but I've met people who are older than me and I see it happening, so I know it's true, but like I've, and like you said for yourself as well, like I've done a pretty good job of like staving off, like, when I hang out with friends of mine from junior high school or high school, some of them are in better shape than others, but I see a lot of them, they have a hard time like sitting down and getting back up out of the seat, and their gut is out to here, and they're kind of like, they're graying faster and their things are falling apart, and they've got taking all kinds of medications, etc., just from not ever thinking that they had to maintain themselves, and so I've seen this from the very beginning. I was like, you need to maintain. I saw this like in high school. I was like, you need to maintain, and so I always, that became like a real priority for me. But yeah, it's gonna drift away, whether it's in my 80s or my 90s, and it's gonna be a sad thing, I suppose, like the way things pass away.
Do you give spiritual teachings though? Do you get into, so for me, I have a really strong 15-year background studying Amazonian shamanism, going to Peru, drinking ayahuasca and several other plants in the jungle. So I've come face to face in ceremony with my own death many times, and then to actually face it with that illness, with the disease for a full year watching. I used to do, this forward bend, Parsvottanasana, with my face in the rotting flesh. There was a bandage there, but I could smell my decaying body for a year. And that's the time where my teacher was connecting me to Advaita Vedanta, and the teaching became so visceral, so real. Even if I'm not giving a teaching, I think that's the place I'm going to, that fundamental, the I am Brahman mantra, but I don't have to give that to someone if it's not their culture and if they're not interested in that. But that's what is coming through for me, that this is all temporary. Like when you get the handstand, it's going to pass. It's a new mind we're making. It's a mind that sees possibility. It's neuronal interconnection. It's new patterns. It's breaking habits. Those are the things that fascinate me. And it's about building a community around you based on the depth you achieve within yourself. So the reason that I'm asking is because you described that boy, you described the guy who's finding himself through the bartending in the 20s. Like right now, as I approach 50, it's 4 years away. I ask myself, and I have a big Indian brain. I've even considered sometimes doing a different career, because I don't want to rely on yoga all the time for a living. And sometimes it is tough when you're toiling through your own stuff to be a spiritual teacher in a way. And I do embrace that to a certain extent because of those experiences with death, with being in the jungle, and with the direct experiences of the shaman. So having Pablo and it's the transcendence, is that communicated, or are you letting them find it through the wonder and miracle of their own body in this integral method you have?
I would say mostly the latter, and it depends on how and on what level we meet, and how and the level of trust, and also my level of trust in my own insights. Where I think I was a lot more confident in my understanding of my own soul and the soul of the world, if you will, when I was in my 30s than I am now, where I've been wrong enough, and I've tested my own theories and realized that wasn't exactly right. And so I've kind of I'm a little bit more humble now. I work privately with people who are very accomplished in their life and aren't exactly asking me for this kind of guidance.
I see.
They may or may not see me that way in the future. But it sort of depends where we meet and how we meet and what they're looking for. I also don't want to delude anybody and overlay more. When you do yoga, you're very suggestive. You're very suggestible. You have to be. Look, you're trying to stretch this thing, and you have to let go of whatever it is that's holding those shoulders forward. So you have to pull them back. Now your heart chakra is wide open, and someone's like, I'm just going to put this in there, and you're like, I'll take it, because I am breathing deeply, opening myself up to that thing. And I think with resistance training, it's this other mindset. Like you mentioned earlier, like using veganism along with the asana practice. Yeah, it's this magical formula. You're depriving yourself of likely what your genetic history has been dependent upon, what your parents and their grandparents and they ate, et cetera. And then suddenly, usually, you're stopping that, and you get smaller, you shrink, right? You become less substantial, and you're less substance, more spirit. And so you start doing the strength training, and it's interesting to hang around people who are strength training. You see people will get bigger and they're more substantial, and they can resist, and they will resist shit like that. You know what I mean? You're like, all is coming. They're like, shut the fuck up, prove it to me. You know what I mean? Here, because their whole thing is about proof, proof that you can resist, etc. I do think that there's something about adding the strength training which makes me a little bit tougher to kind of convince with spiritual theories, etc., and philosophies. But that said, when I did this Katona training, we had it was a mentorship training. So we met. I had little private mini sessions with people, and some people it was just very matter of fact, so. How do you, what's your resource for mobilizing people's hips? And, I'm gonna okay, I do this kind of squat and this kind of squat, and then maybe I sit in ankle to knee, but I don't use, try not to use my hands for things, et cetera. And it's very practical and tactical. And then there's other people who I saw where, oftentimes people do a training, maybe this resonates with you. You're kind of in a lost sort of place, and you're like, somebody take me somewhere. I need to go on a trip other than the one I'm going on in my head. So you take a training. I just broke up with somebody. I'm going to take a training. I just lost my job. I'm going to take a training. Those stories are always there in the training. Sometimes those people are like, I just need more training because I don't know what the hell I'm doing as a teacher. But usually there's something going on in life as well. And so I did have a few clients who, one was a former dancer and her hips were she couldn't do what she used to be able to do. And so she was really frustrated with her home practice. And so a lot of my work with her was just about the psychological, what is the practice for? Why are you doing the practice? And how can we set that intention up so that you don't really care how far you're going with it or what it looks like compared to what you used to be able to do, what other people are doing, where you're still getting something from it. And I felt like I was effective in that regard. When I teach these immersions and I have more than, if I do a 2-hour workshop or something like that, oftentimes I'm kind of just like, we don't know each other well enough for me to have this conversation with you yet. Like I need to be a little bit more intimate with people to have that kind of conversation. So when I do longer trainings, the longer the training is, or the more time I spend with somebody teaching them privately, then maybe these things, as they become more and more curious, they have to want it, like I kind of follow that, like you don't teach something unless someone asks you to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't go around, like if I see somebody doing push-ups in the park, shitty push-ups, I don't like walk up to them like, how shitty your push-ups are, let me explain this to you. Like if they see me doing push-ups and they're like, you're doing something different than I do, what is it you're doing? I'll teach you. So if someone says like, you seem to be able to show up like no matter what and be really focused, like how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you how I focus. I have breathing techniques that I do. I have a mindset that I go into. I have this, oneness state that I gain access to through physicality, et cetera. So that's when I have the conversation. So I might leave little clues or try to show my best self, but I don't, I just don't see that as my role. And I applaud people who do and who do it well. But I just don't think it's mandatory the way I used to think,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a yoga teacher, that I have to like, and I'm not, look, I'm not young, but I'm not old either. And I don't know really, and I haven't had a flesh eating disease or a big scare yet, and hopefully I don't anytime soon. But, when I do, and I get those insights, yeah, I will share them, but not before then,
Yeah, that's really, you were talking about strength and flexibility. I remember you and I took a class at the Shala and you were next to me, and you were floating through primary with the body I have now. And it's a body that can't do the Marichasana sequence. I'm just at A. I have modifications for B, C, and D. And I want to go back to it. I want to surrender the passion you're having for the rings. Like I have a deep love for it. How do you, so for me, it's obvious within the body, but it's obvious in life as well, to always find a healthy tension between opposites. So
right.
expansion and contraction. Help me with strong and supple, especially with like C and D, and how you deal with strong and supple. Like how do you approach those two things? Because there's always a balance between them.
Well, I'll say this, first of all, I haven't done Marishi D since I was going to a Mysore place, this place on the Upper West Side called Ashtanga Upper West Side. This woman named Zoe who led the program there. And I went there when my son was born, maybe like the first 3 years of his life. I was going there because like it was just so distracting at home having a kid. That I couldn't focus on my home practice. So I was like, I'm going to go. That was the first like Mysore experience I had where somebody was like, here's how we do it. Don't change it, please. And I will adjust you in the moments I see fit, et cetera. And you don't get to do this pose until you've done that pose, that type of thing. Whereas I was like skimming through, I can't do this step, but I'll go ahead and do the next thing that I can do to, on my own schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But being somebody doing Ashtanga, I've got thick legs. I've always had thick legs. I've always been like a kicker. Like I've always had like, remarkably large thighs. Like people would comment on it. And generally, and I think I changed that balance between my upper and lower body pretty well in terms of recompositioning. But binding big legs is a lot harder than binding small legs. Like your arms aren't longer, but you got to wrap them around a bigger thing, The mobility that you gain when you do gymnastic ring exercises and the like, if you're doing them properly, you're using full range of motion. So my shoulders are way more open. I just have way more muscular control over how I turn my body, so I can like use my obliques to turn way more readily than I used to be able to, where I had to kind of like swing my body over and lasso my leg up with my arm. Yeah, I mean that suppleness, like the type of moves and skills that I'm working on kind of demand it. And that's it. I also have that background in yoga of having that flexibility. So it's like, so instead of doing a forward bend, now I do toe to bar or toe to ring.
Okay.
And then I work on them with one arm. And so then like you practice, you can do toe to bars, and supposing you already have the technique down in terms of what are you supposed to be doing in your head when you're jumping forward or jumping back, Now, when you hop forward, you literally fold yourself. I mean, you bring your legs towards you. You don't really jump them as much. You know, you change that ratio quite a bit. As one example, working on a Mexican handstand, for example, changes your wheel pose, changes your back bends. Working on like hamstring and glute complex things, like also changes my back bends, changes how I like engage myself, you know, like whereas I used to be like, okay, spine, bend backwards, you know, as opposed to like, okay, like what's the structure underneath this lifting me up? So my whole mindset came towards like control, and build it, like take everything and like scale it back. And it is what it is. You are where you are with these exercises. And so, you know, I feel like with yoga, you get ahead of yourself quite a bit. You know what I mean? Like you can put yourself in a lotus position by taking your hands to your foot and bring the thing over here and bring the other leg over here. You would never do that with your arms, you know. Now your shoulder and your hip joint are designed differently, of course, but I can put myself in ankle to knee, but I can put myself in ankle to knee without my hands, that's it. But right, some people, I used to have to take my shin, put it on top, so I just wasn't ready to do it, but I was doing it. So now that I'm kind of with this mobility mindset, like I want the way the approach that's being used with, you know, functional range conditioning, which is, I haven't studied per se, but my experience with it, which has been a handful of it, is like, it's just a really well-designed system of things that have already existed within other physical cultures. And it's formatted really intelligently, you know. There might be much more to it than I realize it. So I don't want anybody, don't at me on that. But learning how to, like, you know, controlled articular rotations, you know, and learning to like work with that, like control from the joint capsule itself. That keeps me feeling, you know, mobile. Right now, if you put me into a Mysore room, like I would be struggling.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just not conditioned for it. I can't, like, the individual poses probably fine, but like I just don't like lay down a mat and do something for an hour and a half.
It's
like
my
that.
lower body. It's like I have the genetics for massive legs. All my weight. It's a lot of like thick quads. So I
Yeah,
can't.
which is
I
great.
just started jumping through again, but I haven't tried jumping back. I'm worried I'd tweak my shoulder. I want to wait till I thin out with the road running a little bit.
Would you use blocks? Would you consider
Um,
that?
They're right there next to me. I haven't used it yet. I'm still at 190. I think if I get to in the 180s, I might start jumping back. I kind of like put my feet there and give a little lift, but I'm just like swinging them to the side a lot of times.
So, I mean, if you're asking for me for advice, you know, I'm a big fan of parallel bars and using parallel bars to build up that. I mean, so, you know, what I look at is I look at Ashtanga, it's like, okay, it's formatted in this way. It's a brilliant format, but it could have been done differently. You know, had there, you know, like Iyengar decided to use a rope wall, he could have decided to use rings. You know, Ashtanga decided not to have any kind of hanging involved with it. They could have. Like I was saying, I think a lot of the formatting of it is just kind of happenstance. Like, this is the way the person who created it, or people who created it, decided it would work best, and we're going to sell it like this. It's branded, it's packaged. This is what we conceived of. But, you know, in terms of like, what are you trying to do? You're working on compression, bringing your knees into your chest. You're working on shoulder depression. You're working on using your lats and your serratus and your lower traps, et cetera, to create this lift. You can create all those things. You can recreate all those things using different props, using different scenarios. And so that's the way I would go at it first. It's like, you know, like, what do you really want from this? Do you want to be good at the thing as a sport, or do you want to be good at the things that the sport demands that you get good at to play the sport? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like you're basically working with a gymnastics technique, a pike, you know, jumping through and jumping back. And just because in Ashtanga, Sharath says you got to cross your legs, anybody doing it with straight legs is not doing the correct method or whatever. But then you see someone do it with straight legs, and you're like, you're doing something fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a high level of skill you've created there for yourself, buddy. And what did it take you to get there? And now if someone's like, look, I got it here like this, and you look at them like, okay, well, you're 5 feet tall and you weigh 120 pounds, and then I'm bigger. And so maybe this isn't like, I'm not going to be able to learn it the same way you do. So I'm going to change it. So if you look at how gymnasts are trained using props all over the place until they don't need to. but there's all these ways of regressing. And I feel like what yoga is in the world of vinyasa, or the alignment vinyasa, or whatever, was another subject which maybe we could talk about if we have time or not. But there's all these ways of like regressing things to make them possible, so that you can then approach them with the right foundation and come back to it and not just break yourself trying. So when I see people doing primary series and they can't jump through and they can't jump back, and their teacher's like, but we don't use blocks, you'll never learn it that way. But they're doing it like 20 years later, still doing it the same way, and they just didn't get there. And it's like, for who? Why? Change it, to do it on your own. Like take a day off, don't go to the shala, and like train some other thing, find out another way to approach it. And ultimately, if there is some kind of practical lesson, spiritual lesson even, is just like keep finding new innovative ways to improve yourself. Don't rely on the same ways, and don't rely, take the advice of people who've been there and done that, but know that you're different and you're going to have to find another way. So it's kind of like your parents or me telling my kid, like, this is the way to succeed in this area of life that I happen to be able to succeed at. And he's either isn't interested in that, or B, it's just not in his genetic cards, or C, it's just not, he could do those things and he is interested in it, but that's just not the way he's going to get there. And he's going to find another way, perhaps even a better way. Look at the things people are doing now, physically speaking.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous
how much better people are.
They're learning
after
quicker.
A few years of practice, they're learning quicker. They're learning better. Why? Because they're sharing information.
Yeah.
Why is Bitcoin going to be the dominant currency? Because it's a global currency, because everybody's in on it, and there's no gatekeepers here. So you take away the gatekeepers and you're going to learn way faster. That said, that depends on how skillful you are choosing the right information. So if you find somebody who sources really well, you go to a store and they source all the things, you're like, oh shit, they have all the products I want and things I didn't even know I wanted, that's like where Whole Foods stepped in or whatever.
Were you kind of hinting that you have a more cursory, let the student find their way approach now? Or like, because I find myself too dialing back from like, there's not one way to do things at all.
100%. So yes and no. So with alignment, it's tricky. So if you don't know anything and someone gives you alignment cues, it's going to take you, it's like giving you a map and being like, look, if you follow this road, you're going to get from here to here, and you're going to pass by landmarks you would never found on your own, just wandering around aimlessly. So it's going to, the best thing about alignment is that it'll take you somewhere you wouldn't have figured out to go on your own. Right? I would have never thought to externally rotate my hip like this and get this result. Now, it's precise, like I said earlier, and it can be precisely right or precisely wrong. And then even if it's precisely right, doesn't mean that it's the only right way, but it's one way that works a particular way. But it can also be totally misguided, and you shouldn't try to fit your triangle between two panes of glass. I don't know why you would think to have to do that, except that anger said to do it. And so you shouldn't try to open your hips like that and torque your SI joint to be able to get there to achieve this thing, and then not be able to walk well later on that day, et cetera. So it could be right and it could be precisely right, but it doesn't mean it's the only right way. And there's always more than one right way, and there's many, many more wrong ways. Then there's the whole in the beginning, it's like you need to let there be some chaos so that people can kind of just like connect to their body. So it's like, take someone out, like, okay, I want to run. Okay, let's go for a run. Now I'm going to start critiquing your form like right away. No, like just survive the first run, like I went to Jivmuti classes. No one told me how to do anything. I mean, they gave cues. I'm not trying to say they weren't giving cues, but I just kind of like was in the back, like, please don't see me. Let me just survive this thing. If someone like said something to me directly, I was like, I feel bad about myself. Like I'm doing, I just need to be left alone. So it's like with my kid, like when he's drawing, like I'm like drawing the lines, like, no, draw outside of the lines. Eventually I want you to draw in the lines. And then I don't want you to get stuck with the idea that that's the right way to draw, because no one really wants to see your work where you draw in the lines. They want to see your draw where you draw outside of the lines, so but that said, like there's certain things that do work. So, like if you do something well, if you learn some alignment to get you there, that makes sense. Or if you do something well and you never learned alignment, you're still using some kind of alignment that got you there. There's some geometry, there's some kind of biomechanics taking place. That said, when I teach Katona people and they're like, I'm like, okay, we're gonna do split squats, right? And you're gonna bring your knee as far forward over your toes as possible, like when you walk up or down stairs, like when you do all these like mundane activities, you don't realize that your knee goes over your toes. And these people are obsessed with this, the righteousness of a 90 degree of a right angle,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're scared to bring their knee over their toes or to the inside of their toes. I'm like, so when you walk on uneven ground, or when you go for a hike on a trail or something like that, and when you watch anybody play any kind of sport ever, or even a game of tag or anything, or kids playing, their knees are going over their toes this way and that way. And if you don't condition your knees to go over your toes in all different directions, guess what? When it does, suddenly you call it an injury.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only an injury. It's only the only bad weather is the weather you're not prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all about creating resiliency. You should know, I think it's worth your while to know what the most optimal, efficient way of doing things are, and then also practice suboptimal things. So I do handstands, I lean them to this side, I lean them to
Yeah.
that side. And if you're ever going to learn a one-arm handstand, guess what? You're going to break all the rules of your two-arm handstand
Mm-hmm.
to do the one-arm handstand.
Yeah. I'm so excited to train, particularly because I have the energy back for it and the time.
That's so great, man.
I'm so pumped. Like, I can't wait to get the rings up. There's a barn here. I might hang them in the barn now that it's getting warm. And that was a good tip to take big days off in between training the splits, the body
when
parts.
you see how your strength, that's, you grow, like the cliche, you don't grow in the gym, you grow outside of the gym. Sleep became this huge priority for me because, you're damaging your tissues. And so now they have to recover in a major way. You're putting major damage, major stress on them that they need major recovery from. And if they do recover, now you've adapted, you've gotten stronger. But my mindset used to be, even when I was doing like a lot of multi-intenso conditioning, was like, just do it as much as you possibly can. And I started getting overuse injuries, wrist injuries, elbow kind of like nagging, annoying things, my back spazzing and stuff. And I just don't get that stuff anymore, just because of the pacing and the timing of it. So giving yourself those days and like not coming back until, this is another thing psychologically, not coming back till you're psyched. Like, what are you training for? Are you training for the Olympics? Are you training for some sponsorship? Are you training to like compete and get some money, some like purse for a fight or something like that? Great. Like, break your ass doing it, get paid, and then you're going to rest for 6 months and recover and pay for all these treatments and shit. But if you're not, you don't want all your life force going into repairing your body from your exercise.
Yeah.
So I could up the volume of it or the frequency of it, but then it's like, what about the life force keeping my skin smooth and keeping my energy up to play soccer with my kid or whatever, like that kind of stuff. So you see these people who train really freaking hard and really, you see a close up of their face and it aged them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It takes a year, it squeezes that chi out of you,
Yeah.
So you can expand that potential, but taking those days off, and especially with pulling and stuff like that, if you're a big guy and you're not in your 20s, give yourself that day per decade. I would recommend to start with, and then you're psyched for it. Like, you want to get back to it.
Yeah,
and that's huge for me, because
the mental energy,
the mental fatigue, the whole like, oh fuck, if I ever say here we go again for this routine I'm about to do, I just don't do that routine. I do another one.
I think there's value to a foundation, though. So if you stay with a series for a year as your foundation and you show up, especially when you're young, and you adapt to it, or give yourself time to adapt to it. Like for me, I was a big New York nightlife guy in my late 20s. And then I found Eddie Shala, and I was looking for a daily teacher because Sharon and David had moved to Woodstock. And Dharma Mitra was really sweet. I trained with him for 3 months, but I didn't connect to him as the teacher. But when I had one session with Eddie, he said, can you come in every day at 5:45, 6 days a week? And I was like, because I felt the connection, I said yes. And I didn't know what the benefit of that would be, because I had that early time in high school for my military father. But then when he said show up, I showed up, and it pretty much chewed away all that nightlife shit of me staying up till 3 or 4, because the 1 or 2 times I tried to combine them, I suffered so greatly that the love for the series and being in the energy of the Shala helped me to change that habit, which was an immature habit getting into your 30s. I didn't want to, and some people just carried it with them, and like you said, didn't age well, or they burned out. So there's those methodical cult-like things, they do have some value until you can get to a place where you innovate.
Yeah, I'm talking long term.
Yeah.
1,000% agree with you that, look, and when I say short, and I'm talking long term, like more than 5 years.
Yeah.
You spend 5 years with a practice, that's, you can say you gave it a good shot. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
You're doing Ashtanga for if you're doing it for 1 year, no, you don't have it. I don't care how adept you are. Well, maybe some people have some background and whatever, contortion or something like that, and they're like, this is a piece of cake for me. I just can't breathe that well. Maybe they get better at that. But yeah, you put in your 5 years, same thing with a martial art or something like that. You can't just like do like half a year and be like, yeah, I know that one, like you don't know it. But that said, when people identify with it, it becomes part of their identity, and like, and even if they're not like, they change communities or something like that, there's still this kind of like overall sort of communal pressure to be a certain way and think a certain way and practice a certain way. I think at a certain point, you want to diversify. And if you look at the history of these practices, if you read on the origin of these things, these are all multi-intenso classes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like whoever
Ashtanga
created
it's
Ashtanga is
multi-intenso.
multi-intenso.
It's
It's for
wrestling, it's
1,000%.
martial arts, it's
Exactly. And they put
yeah,
it together brilliantly. And it's a
gymnastics.
totally. So you look at those things. So then you can either be like, let me go back to one of those foundations and see what that's all about. Or I can branch off to one of the offshoots of it, the more modernized versions of it. But people are studying, you want to learn about hand balancing, go to, like, you're learning from circus performers now, you're learning from acrobats now, and you're learning like the techniques that like you could have learned in the beginning, but you didn't because you were in this other culture.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that you didn't get something really valuable from it. So, and I don't want to be I have this tendency to sound really dismissive even when I'm not really. Definitely people need to get into it. I think though that there's a certain point with something like Ashtanga where people will just like blow out one knee, get a surgery, blow out the other knee, get a surgery, and then when it's time to get the second surgery on the first knee, that's when they're like, maybe I should try a different. I'm like,
Yeah.
you could decide that sooner. And you could see if your teacher's limping around or whatever, or other students are complaining about, or everybody's got like you ask for anybody got a number of a acupuncturist or body worker? Oh, I've got like 5 different guys I go to. It's like, so your car needs repairs like 3 times a month. Like, where are you driving your car? You have the wrong car. Like, you don't know how to drive. Like, you're crashing into shit. Like,
Yeah.
you can't drive that Lamborghini on like the roads of New York City, like, so you need to like change the car or the means, the roads or whatever. Something's got to give.
Yeah.
Where people will stick to it just because like it's just got this authenticity and that like that taste, that cultural zest that they have an affinity for, or something like that. I think you can get swept away in that stuff. And I saw that happening to me, and I saw that happening to other people. So in that sense, when I talk to, if I talk to somebody who's like, I don't want to do the same practice every day, I'm like, have you ever done the same practice every day? Because there's a lot you get from that,
Yeah.
and that discipline. And then somebody says like, I do the same practice every day, and like, I'm not going to change. I'm like, have you tried doing other practices? Because there's a lot you can get from that. So I take one practice and balance it against the other. I'm like, okay, look, if I'm doing Ashtanga and then I go for a run and I'm just feeling my knees the whole time, there's something wrong with my Ashtanga. Because there's nothing wrong with running. Running is a human thing. Running, people run. Like kids run. Everybody around the world runs. No one teaches them to run. We are made to run away from things, run after things, etc. So I got that like paleo fantasy idea about that, which I think is pretty valid. And so then I have to change either how I'm doing the thing or that I'm doing the thing.
Yeah. You're endlessly experimenting. I'm wondering also the last few years, I have, you and I teaching classes in New York City, you've got a bunch of athletes, you've got a bunch of models, you've got a couple of older people, but I'm drawing lately people in their 50s and 60s. And it's kind of exciting, I think, with my personal maturity and the way I convey the material, that it's not just all perfect fit, 75-minute or hour and 35-minute Jivamukti class with 75 people in it. It's kind of interesting to feel your demographic shift. Have you noticed that in your 40s now?
Yeah. I mean, when you're young, you've got the body, but not the brain. And when you're older, you've got the brain, but maybe not the body. And so if you approach this thing with an intellect, older people are kind of ready to listen.
Yeah.
And their mind is developed enough and they have the patience to kind of follow you through the narrative through to the end and kind of be like, okay, I see where you're going with this. Whereas like, I think, and especially me, like I said, like I went to an annual saw class, I was like, fuck this shit. I'm not even breaking a sweat. I couldn't see where they were going with it. It took me a few years of practicing before I would be like, okay, tell me what I'll hear that pitch again, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with, I went to the Anger Institute and started going there and taking classes with, I especially love to take classes with, what's her name? Carrie Huerco.
She's amazing. I love her.
Amazing. Also a real exploratory individual there, you know, and she's out there in the world going to
great practice into old age too. Like amazing, amazing practice.
Of that. And a wonderful example of someone who's not wearing blinders, who's out there being like, okay, what else is there? I have this background and I learned a lot from that. I came into this, it streamlined it. Now I'm back out there in the world and like, but I can still use that kind of laser-like focus to teach people, you know. And I don't know much about how she's teaching now, except that I follow her on Instagram and see cool things, you know. But yeah, so older people for sure. So now I know I know what it's like to be in an older body, you know, and that doesn't mean that I know what it's like to be in this person's older body or that person's older body. Yeah, I mean, I have more history, I have more compassion for the fluctuations in energy and in strength that one can experience as you get older and hormones change and your body changes, et cetera. And your responsibilities change and also steal your energy, you know, or not steal it, but you put it towards more important things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess I do, especially with like, you know, I find now I used to have like all younger women, youngish women. Yeah. And now I have, when I teach privates, I'm teaching almost all men. Yeah. It's interesting. And I guess they see me as somebody who's kind of like, I'm about their age. Sometimes I'm older than them. I don't even realize it. You know, like I talk to them and like, I'm just assuming just for so many years of being younger than the person I'm teaching privately anyway, that like so now I'm like older than some of them. like that's like a trip for me. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah. That I'm teaching older people and I see it as a good thing. And that I can, you know, with younger people also, I know that like, they just kind of want to have the experience and it doesn't need to, I don't know. It doesn't need to be as worth their while. Like they just want to like do stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't need to go anywhere. Like people will take these classes where it's just like blaring loud music and like the teacher tells good jokes and like it's a good time. It's a party. Like what'd you do? I just had a great time. It went by before I knew it. You know, like they want time to go by faster. Yeah. You get people who are older, they want time to slow the fuck down. Yeah. It's going too fast. My kid's already a teenager. I'm already about to retire. You know, like they want to slow it down. So they're interested in like taking things slower and working more methodically and you know, it's also challenging because like you can't pass off as much bullshit. I mean, you have to really like flesh out. Like people ask me like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the point of this? And I have to like give them an answer. Whereas the younger people, they'll just do it.
Yeah, and I think that's good with the interdisciplinary approach and understanding basic physiology, like coming from it as what do they want? How do I deliver? And what's the transcending quality perhaps underneath this work? Right. That's how I approach it.
That's a beautiful approach.
Yeah. So we're up on time. Is there anything parting shot? Anything you want to share? Or
so I will be just a plug that I'll be participating in the next, not the next one, but in another Katona training, and that I haven't set the dates yet, but I'll also be launching my own individually taught training.
Is it in person, David, or online?
This will be online.
Okay.
Not yet in person. Hopefully in the fall in person, but it'll be May or June. I haven't set the dates yet because I don't have the Katona dates yet, so I'm trying to stagger them. Okay. So those are coming up. So anybody who follows me on Instagram, you'll hear about it there. And if you don't, if you're not on Instagram, you can just subscribe to my newsletter through my website, davidregelinyoga.com.
Cool. Yeah. And your Instagram is your name, right?
Yeah, David Regelin Yoga. Yeah, and I promise I'll start posting more soon.
Cool, man. This has been a good conversation. Thank you so much.
Jai. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. This will open the door to speaking with other peers of mine who have this special place in time of being experienced with life and practice, but still young and limitless. So it's a very poignant part of manhood and womanhood that we are standing at, and I hope to open doors for you in your own perception as you evolve your practice, your training, and focusing your awareness. You can show your support for this podcast on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jai Sugrum. I have 4 memberships that come with specific benefits for each level of support that you show for the podcast. You can also train with me daily, Monday through Friday, by checking out the classes that I offer on Zoom. Just go to my website, jaisugrum.com, and register for a practice. We are all on the journey of peace of mind. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Thank you so much.